a tripartite system of equal power being shared between its executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government. With the executive branch being under the sole control of the president, the judicial branch totally subservient to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the legislative branch being a bicameral law-making body consistently of the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives. Upon President Trump taking power of the executive branch in January of 2017, his Republican Party had control of both the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives, both with the vast majority of these Republicans being what are described as never-Trumpers, who President Trump targeted for total destruction, either by forced resignations or election defeat, obviously in yesterday's 2018 midterm elections, that even had the leftist Vox News service noting whether Republicans lose the House, the Senate, both, or neither, one thing is certain: the ranks of the not-quite-Trumpers will be thinned come January of 2019. With this sizable never-Trump faction within the Republican Party being in constant conflict with President Trump throughout his nearly 2 years in office, they turned the U.S. House into an almost ungovernable lawmaking body, with their last year only producing 768 bills they sent to the U.S. Senate, while 569 of which remain unacted upon, as opposed to the previous Congress, a Congress last 2 years that introduced a total of 10,078 bills and sent 329 of those to President Obama's for signing, with it further being noted that once a Congress adjourns, as it will on January 3rd of 2019, all bills that have been introduced in either the U.S. House or the U.S. Senate that have not made it through the entire legislative process and signed into law are dead. Knowing that he couldn't engage in open political warfare against these never-Trumpers in his own Republican Party controlled in the U.S. House, President Trump decided to ignore them and put his full weight and power behind expelling from the U.S. Senate their never-Trump faction, while at the same time ensuring that he could expand their Republican majority, a nearly impossible feat to accomplish, as this has only been done 5 times in the past 105 years, but that nevertheless President Trump stunningly accomplished, thus leading even Hillary Clinton's top political operative, Philippe Reines, to proclaim that President Trump had secured his 2020 re-election, and his further to bemoan about Trump: he is a freak of nature, and it doesn't matter if he's dumb or not. It doesn't matter what I think. He is a bulldozer. To how much of a political bulldozer mastermind President Trump in fact really is, this report explains, can be seen in how he took over the entire U.S. Senate and was brilliantly displayed by his giving Republican Party U.S. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell what he had long dreamed of his entire political life: total conservative control over the judicial branch of the U.S. government. Working hand in hand with Senate Leader McConnell, and in less than 2 years, President Trump has placed on the U.S. Supreme Court 2 of its most conservative judges in history, Justice Neil Gorsuch and Justice Brett Kavanaugh. That now gives this court an unbreakable conservative majority, with his further having placed 84 strict conservative judges in the U.S. federal district courts, 29 of whom are U.S. federal appellate judges, and with his historic election victory yesterday, is now able to fill 111 vacancies in U.S. district courts and 11 vacancies on the U.S. Court of Appeals, with conservatives as well. Though the leftist Democrats are proclaiming their blue trickle over the U.S. House as some kind of victory, nothing could be further from the truth, as the now fully conservative Trump-McConnell justices on the U.S. Supreme Court are poised to deliver some of the most destructive blows to these leftists they've ever experienced, and whose weapons of mass destruction to do so are the case titled Gamble versus the United States, that will expand President Trump's absolute pardonability to include state, not just federal crimes and offenses. The case titled Manhattan Community Access Corporation versus Halt. This is set to declare that all social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Google, etc., are public forums protected by the First Amendment, whose users can't be banned or blocked because of what they say or what religions and or political beliefs they have. And the case titled Pereira versus Sessions that recently retired U.S. Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy championed to destroy the Chevron deference doctrine that underpins the entirety of the leftist-created bureaucracy regulatory state, and that his replacement, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, fully supports doing as well. So, any of these leftist Democrats believing that their blue trickle takeover of the U.S. House will enable them to roadblock President Trump's agenda to destroy globalist forces by tying him down in countless investigations, this report notes is almost comical for anyone believing such a thing can happen, most particularly because all President Trump has to do is follow former President Obama's guidebook for stonewalling these lawmakers of an opposition party that was so complex and masterful nearly all of Obama's own appointed inspector generals ran to the Republican Party, controlled U.S. Congress, and pleaded for them to save them. Also being most overlooked of one of the other most important victories for President Trump is this blue trickle election. This report concludes is that the never-Trump Republican Party controlled in the U.S. House has now been replaced by a Democratic Party-controlled one, whose minor victory was achieved by virtually none of these Democrats even mentioning Trump in their campaign ads, with their instead choosing to promise the American people who voted for them that they'd work across the aisle to accomplish things. But if they fail to keep this promise, will, most assuredly, provide President Trump all the ammunition he needs to expose them as lying hypocrites as he soars to another 4 years of power in 2020.
Joining me now, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and it's great to have you here. Lots of things have changed over the past 2 years, including you and the president forming this relationship that has shown an ability to get a lot of work done, a lot of accomplishments, and we'll talk about those in just a moment. But I did want to ask you about something that has not changed, which is President Trump taking on the media. Lindsey Graham, one of your colleagues, tweeted this earlier after this press conference. It's apparent to me the White House press corps lives in a bubble, and the way they are conducting themselves today will do nothing to improve their standing with the American people. Do you think that many Democrats might be surprised at how Trump supporters would have taken that press conference?
I suppose so. The whole business of criticizing the press is something Republicans have done for years. There's always been a tilt against us and most of the media out in the world, but we still win. The president got elected. We had a great day yesterday and increased our number in the Senate. We still have a majority. We're still going to be able to confirm judges and cabinet members. And hopefully we'll be able to work out some bipartisan deals, as the president indicated, with Speaker Pelosi and the new Democratic House.
I was just thinking back to 2006 when the Republicans lost the majorities then. So similar situation, at least on the House side. Now that, how different might it be? You maintain the majority and you increase your numbers here in the Senate. You talked today about Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats. Caution them against presidential harassment. Do you think that she'll stick to that?
I don't know, but what I was talking about in my press conference was in the late 90s, my party had control of the House and Senate. We impeached Bill Clinton. His approval rating went up and ours went down. And so my suggestion to the new Democratic majority in the House is the business of presidential harassment might not work out too well for you politically.
But Nancy Pelosi also gave a press conference today. She talked about health care, and I want to have you listen to that and react. Take a listen.
Voters delivered a resounding verdict against congressional Republicans' attacks on Medicare, Medicaid, and the Affordable Care Act and people with pre-existing conditions in districts everywhere in America. They went in a new direction.
Is there something that the Republicans can do to try to get back on track on health care so that the American people think they've got a plan?
Well, first of all, there aren't any Republican attacks on Medicare or Social Security. That's all Democratic fantasy that they spin every 2
cycle.
years. Yeah, well, but with regard to health care, it's not working well. This is Obamacare. It's not working well. The American people are giving us divided government. The Democrats now have some governing responsibility, being in the majority in the House. I think what they're saying to us is, you guys get together and figure out a way to improve the health care system. Obamacare has not worked well. So they've given us divided government. We have to work together. We need to improve the health care system in America because it's not working well.
And do you think that you'd be able to get something that the president would be able to sign?
Look, that's what happens when the American people give us divided government. They're saying, okay, we've listened to both of you.
Yeah,
we're not giving all the government to either side. Get together and work it out. For example, they spun all over the country that we were somehow, my side was somehow against coverage of those with pre-existing conditions. That's a campaign approach that wasn't true, and B, doesn't get us a solution. Now they have part of the responsibility for governing. Let's get together and figure out how to make it better.
Right, it is different when you have some responsibility for governing. That's true. Speaking of that, I did want to ask you about the Kavanaugh effect. Ed O'Keefe tweeted this: 4 of the big 5 vulnerable Senate Democrats lose or losing tonight. Donnelly, Heitkamp, McCaskill, and Nelson. All 4 voted against Kavanaugh. The one that did vote for Kavanaugh, Joe Manchin, prevails. I wonder if you think that Senator Chuck Schumer made a mistake in not telling some of his red state Democrats, go ahead, vote for Kavanaugh, save your seat. What's more important, to save the seat or to have the issue that you ultimately ended up losing on?
Yeah, I don't know whether Schumer can order people to vote or not. I haven't had much luck doing that on my side. But I can say that
you sort of give permission. You're like, you got it. You do what you have to do to win your seat.
Yeah, well, I do think voting against Kavanaugh was a mistake, and I think Ed O'Keefe's tweet sums it up. Those who, in competitive races, who voted against Kavanaugh lost. The one who voted for him won. It was like a shot of adrenaline to our side. People felt that Justice Kavanaugh was being treated unfairly, being presumed guilty instead of presumed innocent. We all watched the mob tactics of those who were up here, chasing my members out of restaurants and showing up at their homes. Yeah, I mean, it was counterproductive. And it registered with the American people how important it was to continue to control the Senate right before the election. So it ended up politically, as unpleasant as it was to go through it, it ended up politically being a godsend for Republicans.
Do you support Senator Chuck Grassley's committee looking into allegations that where you had accusers of Brett Kavanaugh now recanting them, and he's now referring those for investigation?
Yeah, he's referring them to the Justice Department. I think he's doing the right thing.
Let me ask you about tax cuts, because the president brought it up today. I'll play a little bit of that for you and see what you think might be possible in this next Congress.
If the Democrats come up with an idea for tax cuts, which I'm a big believer in tax cuts, I would absolutely pursue something, even if it means some adjustment.
Some adjustment on which side? The corporate, the individual?
Yeah, to make it possible. But I would love to see a tax cut for the middle class. Now...
we don't know yet who will be the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, but do you think it would be possible to try to do this in the next Congress if Nancy Pelosi was willing to play ball?
Yeah, all tax legislation has to originate in the House under the Constitution. The Democrats are in charge of the House. If they've got a good idea about how to reduce middle-class taxes, boy, we'd be anxious to take a look at it.
Take them up on it. I did want to ask you about this problem that the Republicans and the Democrats have, and that is this deepening urban and rural divide, where the Republicans are so strong in all the rural areas across America, but in the cities and increasingly the suburbs, there are exacerbated problems. And in fact, you saw that with Dean Heller, for example. We got a quote there from The Hill. Dean Heller lost his re-election bid on Tuesday, and it has doomed Republicans as growing cities come to dominate once influential areas. What could Republicans do to try to stop their slide there?
Well, we definitely need to stop the slide. We used to do much better in the suburbs across America than we're doing now. We're happy about the gains that we've made in rural America, which didn't used to be totally Republican like it seems to be now.
Right.
But we ought to be able to do both. We ought to be able to appeal to our rural and small town constituents and do a better job than we did Tuesday in the suburbs. And I think that's something we need to address going into the 2020 election.
Do you think that's about tone, or is it about issues? Is it health care, immigration, et cetera? Or do you think it's about tone and reaching out, or just even trying, I guess, in the cities?
Yeah, I don't know, but I think we need to analyze that. There's no particular reason for Republicans to underperform in the suburbs where we've been strong for many, many years.
Right. Let me ask you about Andy Barr. He's a congressman from Kentucky 6. He was able to beat out Amy McGrath, but she ran a pretty good race. Some people had suggested Amy McGrath might try to run against you in 2020. Do you think that will not happen now?
Well, it's a free country, but it was a terrific victory by Andy Barr. He was outspent dramatically. That's a purple district. It's gone back and forth between the parties over the years, and it was a great victory for Andy Barr. He earned it, and I was really proud of him.
My last question for you is, you're running the Senate for the next 2 years, and there are about half a dozen senators on the other side, Democrats, who want to run in 2020. How might that affect things going on in the upper chamber?
Schumer may have an attendance problem as he looks around to see who's in town when they're not in Iowa and New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do apparently have a lot of Democratic presidential wannabes here in the Senate. It'll be interesting to see what they're up to.
All right. Well, you always play your cards a little close to the vest, but we'll keep checking in with you on that. Congratulations on the wins in the Senate last night. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, thank you.